and welcome back to our series on ember-cli-deploy. Currently, we've got our app both deployed and talking to the API. Now we're going to add versioning. Why versioning? Aside from being programmers and reflexively liking to version things, there are two big benefits I see. The first is that this makes it easy to test new deploys in production before showing them to the general public. The second is that if the current deploy ends up having a bug, it's easy to revert to a previous version. To implement our versioning, we'll be installing 3 different plugins which work together via the hooks in the build pipeline. One of them will be S3 specific, but much of what we learned today can be useful with other strategies as well. So the first add-on will be ember-cli-deploy-revision-data. So we can install this in the typical way. The sole purpose of this add-on is to generate a unique revision key. So it all comes down to this one line right here. And this revision key can be used by other plugins. So this is a great way to share a common feature between add-ons that may not have much in common. The second add-on will be ember-cli-deploy-display-revisions. The sole purpose of this add-on is to take the deploy list command and make it display the available revisions. The command itself is built into ember-cli-deploy, but it doesn't seem to do anything unless there's a plugin such as ember-cli-deploy-display-revisions that does something with the display revisions hook. Of course, it also needs the fetch revisions hook to be filled out in order to be useful, and this is explicitly stated that it needs to be done by a different plugin, and that plugin will be ember-cli-deploy S3 index. This is also the plugin that will take the revision key spit out by ember-cli-deploy-revision-data and hook that into the upload process. Also, it will allow us to choose which revision to activate at any given time. But first, we have to set up the configuration. We'll put our configuration into the S3 index key, but from there, we'll basically copy what we have in S3. We can also delete the file pattern from both of them, since we're now taking care of uploading the index.html file via the S3 index plugin. We'll go ahead and save our changes, and with that, we can deploy to production. And it's deployed. I skipped a little bit of time when I was messing with permissions on S3. We'll ask for a list of our deployments back, and it will give us the one deployment we've had since installing the ember-cli-deploy-revision-data plugin. Let's change something small in our app, and then deploy again to see what that does with the revisions. You'll see that there's another revision in the list. This shows us that you don't need to commit to deploy, so keep that in mind. More as a pitfall to avoid than a tool to be exploited, although it can be useful to look at new revisions in production before committing them to Git. So let's go ahead and repeat this process, but without actually changing anything. So notice this error, the revision is already uploaded. So if we look at our revision list, we'll see that it's still just 2. Then if we make more changes, then it will allow us to deploy a different revision. And this revision is, of course, unique from the other 2 that came before it. So we've changed something and then deployed, but you'll see that nothing has changed. That's because our new version hasn't been activated yet. Before we activate it, we may want to preview it. So after the index.html, you put a colon and then the version number. And there, that's our newest version. To activate it, run ember-deploy::activate, and then you put in the revision number, and make sure to put in production, or whichever the target is. So now when you reload, it has that version. If you want to activate your new revision immediately without deploying it, then you can add the activate option to your deploy command. If you do this, then you won't have to run the deploy::activate command later. So that's how you use revisions in your Ember deploy. The commands themselves are really easy. The more complex part of this episode was understanding the hooks that get used in order to get the 3 plugins that we went over to work together. We'll talk more about that next week when we're talking about the Lightning deploy stack. I'll see you then.